Thank you, Prof, to give me a chance to speak here for Korean friends. In this presentation, I will speak about basic things to use MBCA group for embolization. So this is the data at 2016, 5 years ago. So we use NBCA for various disease, mainly for bleeding, shoulder arteries, and arterial shunt. It's a very effective and useful embolic material. NBCA is a kind of glue for human body. It polymerizes in the presence of anion. When it contacts with anion in the blood, it can polymerize immediately and occur vessel. There are three mechanisms of blood vessel occlusion by NBCA. The main mechanism is mechanical obstruction of vessel lumen with glue cast. Additional mechanisms secondary to NBCA are acute or chronic inflammatory reaction and thrombus formation. Those secondary mechanisms are also important. This is an old paper to show clinical evidence of chronic inflammatory reaction after NBCA injection. This is a case of brain AVM embolized with NBCA and reject 3 months after embolization. Histological specimen shows infiltration of the inflammatory cell in the vessel lumen and perivascular space with angionecrosis and fibrotic changes. Those secondary changes of inflammation and thrombus formation promote the embolization effect. However, it has a negative aspect that it has a risk of further and prolonged tissue damage surrounding the embolization site. It may cause skin necrosis or mucosal ulcer, and therefore injection of large amount of glue for cutaneous or mucosal region should be avoided. For injection of NBCA, it should be mixed with Lipiodol to control polymerization time and to see it on fluoroscopy. Before injection, catheter should be flushed by glucose to avoid early polymerization in the catheter. When NBCA Lipiodol mixture contact with anion, it polymerizes from its surface to center. There is a time gap of polymerization time between the surface area and central area, and it depends on the concentration of NBCA. Behavior of NBCA injected in the vessel lumen from the catheter can be different in each situation. Injection in medium-sized vessel with moderate flow, it will advance a bit far from the catheter tip and stop by polymerization and adhesion to the vessel wall, then it can back to the proximal side. When NBCA is injected in a large and high-flow vessel, it is easy to be fragmented and flow distally. When NBCA injection injected in the small vessel with stagnated flow, glucose stagnated in the vessel lumen prolongs the polymerization time, and NBCA can penetrate distally without fragmentation. There are several factors potentially affect the embolization effect by NBCA. Concentration of NBCA in the mixture is related to the polymerization time. High concentration NBCA, more than 50%, quickly polymerized with a second. Low concentration NBCA show longer polymerization time, and this polymerization time is affected by several factors, including injection speed, blood flow, and flow velocity, and diameter of vessel. As noted before, temperature affects the viscosity of the Lipiodol. Among those factors, we can control some of them We can adjust mixture ratio and control injection speed. Blood flow can be reduced by blowing coil while reducing blood pressure. High temperature reduces the viscosity of Lipiodol and it promotes distal penetration when VC Lipiodol mixture with low concentration LVCN. So we heat the glue mixture just before injection for some cases, particularly for tumor embolization. However, higher temperature can shorten polymerization time of NBCA. Therefore, in my personal opinion, there is no benefit to heat the glue with a mixture more than 20% NBCA concentration. There are two techniques for NBCA injection. One is a continuous chrome injection, and second is a sandwich injection. Continuous chrome injection technique is a major technique. We usually use this technique. Glucose is injected in the catheter, and then NBCA is continuously injected until the target region is filled. Sandwich injection, so glucose is injected in the catheter lumen, and then small amount of NBCA is injected in the catheter lumen, then it pushed by the glucose. So in the continuous chrome injection technique, there's a two situations. Well, free flow injection and wedge injection. Flow-free injection, the NBCA can flow distally into the basal lumen and polymerized after attaching the anion and adheres in the basal wall and stop. For the wedge injection, glucose stagnated in the feeding artery can prolong the polymerization time of the NBCA, so it promotes a deep penetration of the NBCA. So there's various diseases for the target of NBCA embolization. Those could be roughly divided into three types: peripheral bleeding, shoulder aneurysm, proximal aneurysm, shoulder aneurysm, and arterial venous shunt. For the distal peripheral shoulder aneurysm or bleeding, benefit of NBCA embolization is mainly for its rapid occlusion without necessity of coagulant status, sufficient coagulant status. For example, a traumatic patient with bleeding from the distal branch and with abnormal coagulant status, NBCA would be the good indication for such patient. It has the drawbacks of less controllability and potential risk of ischemic complication. But if you can advance a microcatheter close to the target region, it is very easy to embolize using low concentration NBCA with injection very slowly. So this is an example of renal shoulder, renal artery shoulder, and AV shunt. We can advance on microcatheter here and inject through low concentration of NBCA. So immediately after embolization, you can see the complete occlusion of these target regions. So general technique is microcatheter, advance close to the target region, and use of low concentration NBCA, and injection of NBCA very slowly. So this is an example of sandwich technique. If you cannot advance a microcatheter close to the shoulder aneurysm, CT shows the shoulder aneurysm here, right lung, bronchial artery angiography. You can see here is the shoulder aneurysm. It's very far from the catheter tip, and it is impossible to advance microcatheter close to the shoulder aneurysm through these tortuous arteries. So we perform the NBCA injection with sandwich technique. So we inject NBCA pushed by the glucose. A part of the NBCA can easily penetrate the target region. So after injection, you can see complete obliteration of the sugar eyes. So for the aneurysm or shooters at the proximal site, we usually use a higher concentration ratio of NBCA and often use additional technique to flow reduction to prevent distal migration of NBCA. So this is the bronchial artery aneurysm here, right bronchial artery aneurysm, and the bronchial artery, parent artery is very tortuous, and the large aneurysm, and distal part of the parent artery also forms the aneurysm-like dilatation, and here is the stenosis. So we wanted to embolize from here to here and proximal side of the aneurysm, but it is difficult to navigate microcatheter beyond the aneurysm and stenotic portion to there. So we put some core in the aneurysm lumen to reduce the flow, and we advance the microcatheter close to the outflow, and then inject 50% of NBCA here, 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 and here. Then we put some coils at the proximal feeding artery, proximal parent artery, and aneurysm is completely occluded. 2 years follow-up MRDSA, you can see the complete obliteration of the aneurysm, and shrinkage was obtained. For the AVM, AVF, NBCA has an important role. So this is a very famous classification system of AVM by Du and Cho from Samsung Medical Center. Among the 3 types of AVM, type 1 and type 2 can be cured by embolization. So there is a different technique for the treatment of type 1 and type 2 AVM due to the different angular architecture. For the type 1 AV fistula, AVM, the occlusion of the fistula's point is essential for the successful treatment. For this purpose, we often use a coil and glue. This is an example of type 1 AV fistula AVM, and this is the large AVM. So we advance from balloon catheter at the renal artery, and also 3 microcatheter is advanced close to the fistula's portion, and put some coils to reduce the flow. Then we inject 50% of NBCA from here. So after embolization, you can see the complete obliteration of the AVM without sacrificing normal renal arterial branch. This is another example of type 1 AVM presented with swelling of the fistula and dull pain. So MRI shows large barracks and large feeding artery in the right axilla. So MRDSA, you can see the large and high flow AVM here. So CT is very important to know the angular architecture of the AVM. This is the feeding artery. It's a lateral thoracic artery, runs downward, and touches. And this is the feeding artery here, runs anteriorly and inferiorly. Here is the shunt point, 2 shunt points, and this is a normal branch beyond the fistula's point. And we perform embolization via using two catheter from femoral artery and right brachial artery, two catheter is positioned at the lateral thoracic artery, and one microcatheter is advanced into the fistular point. Then another microcatheter is advanced beyond the fistular point to the normal branch. And we put some 3 coils in the feeding artery using anchoring technique. And injection at another catheter, you can see the stagnation contrast media in the barracks. Then we inject NVCA from the microcatheter at the fistulous portion, with pulling a microcatheter back to the proximal side. Okay. So it initially injected at the fistulous point. Here, it go into the venous side a little bit and fistulous portion. Then we pull back a microcatheter proximally. Now you can see the groove cast in the proximal to the coil mass. Then we'll finish the injection by NVCA. After embolization using NVCA, you can see complete obliteration of the AVM. Yeah. So 6 months follow-up MRI-DSA shows a no recurrence of AVM. MRI also shows the disappearance of AVM without mass effect. Only 2-3 coils you can see here. So general technique of NVCA embolization for type 1 AVM. So use a high concentration of NVCA with flow control technique. It's very important. For the type 2 AVM, it's supplied from the multiple feeding artery, small multiple feeding artery. So theoretically, it is possible to occur this type of AVM by embolize all fistulous portion, but it is very, very difficult. So usually we embolize this some part and embolize the venous side. For this purpose, we often embolize a non-target feeder, and finally we inject NVCA from the target feeder until it's sufficiently filled in the venous side and back to the other feeding arteries. We use the devascularization technique of the non-target feeder by coils, and sometimes we use the balloon catheter. So this is an example of use of balloon catheter. So this is AV fistula at the anterior cranial fossa. It's supplied by the left anterior ephemoidal artery of the ophthalmic artery. It's also supplied from the sphenopalatine artery, external carotid artery, and the middle meningeal artery. It's also supplied from the right anterior ethmoidal artery. So this is summary of feeding artery. It's mainly supplied by the left anterior ethmoidal artery, and it's also supplied from right anterior ethmoidal artery, and the anterior fascial artery from the middle meningeal artery, sphenopalatine artery from the external carotid artery. So we advance the microcatheter. Our plan is advance the microcatheter into main feeder as possible, as close to the shunt, and blood flow from the right anterior ethmoidal artery is blocked by the balloon occlusion of the internal carotid artery at the orifice of the ophthalmic artery. Now injection of NVCA. So we advance the microcatheter into the left anterior artery using 14 microguide wire. Now we advance the microcatheter here into the anterior artery. And angiography, here is a shunt. Microcatheter is here. So you can see the normal branch to the ethmoid and nasal cavity. So we advance the microcatheter further into the proper feeding artery. And another microballoon catheter is positioned at the right internal carotid artery to reduce the flow from the right ophthalmic artery. Then we inject 20% of anesthesia from the left ethmoid artery. It goes in the feeding artery, and it now into the venous side here. So to avoid the fragmentation, we stop a second and inject again. Now it also feeds in the feeding artery and also in the venous side here. So we continue to injection and it go into the venous side. And now we stop injection and again after a few seconds it go into the another feeding artery. Then we stop the injection and withdraw microcatheter. After injection, you can see the complete obliteration of the everywhere. And the left external carotid artery also shows the disappearance of the AV shunt. Right internal carotid artery also shows the disappearance of AV. So CT shows good cast sufficiently filling the venous side and also feeding arteries. So this is an example of type 2 AVM, renal arterial AVM. You can see a large venous sac, multiple feeding artery. Selecting angiography also shows multiple feeding arteries. For this AVM, we use balloon catheter and to catheter system. And we advance the microcatheter into one feeding artery and inject NBCA. Okay. We advance the microcatheter here, and the varices is here, and the shunt is here. It's a little bit far. Balloon occlusion, under balloon occlusion of renal artery. We inject groove very, very slowly in the feeding artery. The NBCA is a little bit back to the proximal side, but we continue to injection. Now there is another feeding artery. It's anastomose here. And we continue to inject beyond the anastomose, and now it penetrates into the venous side now. Then we withdraw microcatheter. You can see another feeding artery here. But the shunt flow is becomes slowly. And we inject NBCA again from another feeding artery to fill barracks. Okay. After sufficient filling of the barracks and feeding artery, we stop the injection. Yeah. Angiography, you can see the complete obliteration of the renal AVM without sacrificing normal renal arterial branch. So, groove embolization technique for type 2 AVM. Generally, we use a diluted groove and inject very slowly. Wedge injection and distal part injected from the distal portion be recommended. And additional technique is sometimes very effective for embolization. So key point of NBC injection. You should understand the property of NBC by mixture and to know the factor affecting embolization by NBCA and select the technique of these property of the NBCA and also depend on the angioactivity and hemorrhage of each case. So I would like to say for beginners, don't afraid to use NBCA. And for young intervention radiologists with some experience using NBCA, you must afraid to excessive injection to avoid complications. Thank you for your attention.